So just to address your question about how to contribute to PyTorch and how to get started, very first thing I always tell this to people that please start getting comfortable with the library first. Okay, so you have to be a user of PyTorch to understand what you need to contribute. So unless until you are just planning to contribute to one or two issues, that's fine. That's different. You can pick up good first issues. But my way of doing it is first you need to be a user to be able to say that okay, I can maintain or contribute to it, because then you have this user empathy towards when you start contributing that okay, no, you would also not want it, so why would you do it, right? These kind of things come up very often, and that's one way. Second thing is in terms of whether you need to know C++ or not, you don't need to be proficient, because when PyTorch has grown to this much, right? Because it's now in Linux Foundation, right? And it also has these many stars. The thing is that there's a lot of good documentation, and there are a lot of good PRs as well that are available. Okay, so if you really want to contribute, you can just scroll through all the PRs that are similar to what you're trying to do right now. So let's take an example that you're trying to add a new operation to it. Okay, in PyTorch, and you see an issue for it. Okay, let's say there's a nan underscore mean, nan underscore median, right? Nan means not a number, right? I hope you guys are aware. So these are very useful functions, and these are quite like useful as well for linear algebra and kind of stuff, right? And let's say you want to add it. So for those kind of functions, what you can do is you can look out for another function that has been implemented, and then you can try and go through the PR itself that had added that function, or you can try going to the code and also see who contributed that. If you have any questions, you can go to PyTorch Slack, or you can tag them on GitHub issue, and they will guide you through. So I don't really think that you need to be proficient in C++ to be able to contribute to PyTorch, but there are few parts where you need to like understand that you need to have better understanding of the code base compared to some other part of PyTorch. Like for example, linear algebra and all, those are not CUDA specific. But if you're touching the kernel side of it, there are few things that are CUDA specific, and you would probably need some heads up from NVIDIA team, who like because they have the most context on CUDA as a language, right? And or maybe someone else who knows CUDA, not just NVIDIA's team, but in my opinion, I think those are the few things that I will not suggest that you immediately pick up as a beginner. You start off with something, right, and try to see okay if there's any bug that you face and you want to solve it. That's how you can get started. Um, when I got started, the very first thing I wanted to do was build PyTorch from source, because when you build a library from source on your own system, you will realize that there are a lot of issues that come up, right? When let's say you just start with GitHub first issue, and then you see, oh, for this I need to build it from source, and then I'll be able to test my change. That doesn't make sense to me. To me, what makes sense is first you build it from source, then you try to add a few cout statements of it depends on kind of debugger you use. I would use GDB, I would hit a breakpoint, I would try to see what are the calls that are being made from a function in Python to C++. Try to understand the transition from Python to C++. How does it go? How does the binding work? Right? And once you understand, okay, what's the flow, then you start grasping it. Okay, let's say if I'm saying power tensor comma 2, okay, so I want to say tensor square, right? So how will that work? At the end of the day, you will see that it's still calling the STL library next to I think it will be stored namespace POW. That's what it calls if you're on CPU. If you're in CUDA though, I think it will be calling the CUDA kernel and inbuilt function there in the library, as far as I know, right? So these are very interesting things. So once you understand the flow of it, maybe you would try to write a code of it. You would try to write a blog on it, that how does it work, how does a power function work in PyTorch, right? And once you do all these things, you will start realizing there are a lot of to-dos in the code base itself. Then you pick them up and try to create an issue and say that okay, hey, I want to work on this, right? So for example, if you look at nanprod, right, there's a function that you are trying to add. It's very simple. Once you understand, okay, I want to add nanprod, you will look at nansum, and you see that nansum has been like registered here. Then you have to register nanprod as well. It's not have to, but probably like you have to register here as well. So you have to look at, okay, do I need to or do I not? Okay. And similarly, reduce ops.cpp, there's a defined dispatch nanprod stub. What it basically means in short is that you're trying to dispatch. If it's a CPU, dispatch to CPU kernel. If it's a CUDA like device, you dispatch to a CUDA kernel. All these things, right? So over here you see that I'm doing for integral types. How should it go for other types? How should it go? How should you get the D type and all? So this is when we were doing, like, I think in 2020 when I was an intern there. Okay. And there are different type of functions that you need to add, and this all seems like a very difficult thing right now, But if you look at other functions, they have been implemented the same way. So you don't need to be like nervous after looking at these things. You will understand once you go and try to read the function, the way other functions are defined, right? So I can give you an example. Over here, nanprod is there. It returns tensor. It takes a tensor itself, and it has a dimension to it. Keep dim d type, right? This d type is used. How does this d type is used? By the way, I don't think this PR was merged, but this is just a sample PR I want to show, right? Similarly, the other things I've done as well. There are 4 cases. I mean, there are review comments as well that you can read through. But anyways, that's what I wanted to say. You need to understand how does the existing flow work for a particular function to be able to add a new function properly. There are few people who contribute and then they leave. If you want to be one of those people, that's fine to just pick up a good first issue. But if you want to contribute to a library and be a part of it, right, not as a maintainer but as a contributor and be an active contributor, be able to review PRs as well, you need to understand the code base. And for a library with such a huge code base, you can't really understand everything in a go, right? For that, as I said, you need to pick up a few parts. Let's say you're good in linear algebra, so you can pick up the functions that are related to linear algebra in PyTorch, and you can understand how does the flow work. So linalg namespace is there, for example, I think. So you can go through it, you can understand what functions are there. And for each modules, I think there are generally contributors which are active in this. Like for example, there are a lot of contributors from Coinsite, where I worked as well in 2021. There are people who do that, and you can just ping them on GitHub or PyTorch Slack as well, and they'll be very helpful in terms of how does it work and trying to review your PRs as well. So yeah, in short, you don't need to be proficient in C++, given that PyTorch is at a stage right now which has good documentation and it has good governance as well. It was always good, to be honest. To me, it never had any problems. But of course, things have to move forward according to directions, right? So yeah, I mean, that's just my understanding from what I've learned. Um, Opinions might differ. People, like person to person, this might differ, but what I feel is what I told you. Feel free to ask any follow-up questions if you have any. But yeah, good question, by the way. Hope you try to contribute to PyTorch and learn something from there.